Austin Dillon and Rich Trost Racing lose their appeal. Leigh Diffey will join NASCAR and NBC for the remainder of this season, and Ryan Preece has emerged as a surprise candidate to join RFK Racing in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple of days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Preece's 2024 True Work scheme that we'll see this weekend at Daytona. I like this paint scheme. I like the yellowish green number. I like the black, and it looks really solid. I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brad Keselowski's 2024 King's Hawaiian Pretzel Bite scheme that we'll see this weekend at Daytona, Atlanta, and also at Watkins Glen. I like the scheme a lot. I've been a big fan of the main King's Hawaiian scheme, but I like the blue they've added on. I think it looks excellent. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Daytona. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2024 Coke Zero Sugar scheme that we'll see this weekend at Daytona. Trackhouse nailed this one. It looks amazing. The colors look great. I like the red. I like everything about it. It's a fantastic looking scheme. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Gibbs' 2024 Reagan scheme that we'll see this weekend at Daytona. This paint scheme is basically kind of toward that Reagan documentary movie that's coming up that Dennis Quaid is going to star in. I think the scheme actually looks really solid, all things considered. Yes, it's kind of controversial to have a former president as a scheme, but I think it does look pretty epic. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2024 Eero scheme that we'll see this weekend at Daytona. I think it's solid. It's not amazing. I like the bluish or the color they're using. It's okay, but it's awesome to see Josh Berry have a new sponsor for this weekend at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Haley's 2024 Beefaroo scheme that we'll see this weekend at Daytona. Scheme's okay in my opinion. Really do like to see a new company coming in and working in NASCAR. I don't believe Beefaroo has worked in NASCAR before, so it's pretty exciting to see a new company join the NASCAR Cup Series. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2024 Columbia scheme that we'll see this weekend at Daytona. I've always been a big fan of the Bubba Wallace Columbia schemes. This one's no exception. I think it looks absolutely fantastic, looks really great, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Osabar's 2024 Bon Secours scheme that we'll see next weekend during the Southern 500. We've seen the throwback scheme before, but they're doing a different look with the Swamp Rabbits coming in to sponsor as well. I think it looks okay in my opinion. It looks decent. I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend, or next weekend I should say, at Darlington. And a final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Lane Riggs' 2024 Zorn Compressor scheme that we'll see this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile. I like the yellow, I like the black, I think it looks pretty solid, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Kansas Truck Race, as they have a title sponsor. The race title is going to be called the Kubota Tractor 200. Of course, Kansas Truck Race is coming up in the next month or so. I think it's cool to see Kubota. They've got a big partnership with Trackhouse. They've also got a big partnership with Ben Rhodes in Thor Sport Racing. I think it's a very interesting sponsorship name. I think it's one of the cutoff races for the upcoming weeks. It's a pretty cool sponsorship name for the Truck Series race. Pretty solid sponsorship name, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carolina Carports. As it was announced yesterday that Carolina Carports will be returning to Junior Motorsports to sponsor the organization in 2025. They'll have 5 primaries throughout the whole 2025 season, and they're also going to sponsor Connor Zilisch at Watkins Glen in September. They've been sponsoring all year. They sponsored Justin Allgaier, they've sponsored Sam Mayer, and other drivers at the team, and they're expected to sponsor Connor Zilisch, I believe, for 2 or 3 races next season as well. So it's one of Connor Zilisch's first big sponsors, though WeatherTech, of course, will be working with Connor Zilisch throughout the whole entire year. I think it's pretty exciting to see a company return. I think the sponsorship looks amazing. It looks fantastic. It looks incredible. And pretty awesome to see the Carolina Carports will be back to work with JRM in 2025. Pretty awesome and exciting stuff. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Daytona and Milwaukee purses. Every time you have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockrass puts out the purse money for that event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race is $9,193,568. For the Xfinity race is $1,886,123. And for the Truck race in Milwaukee is $672,572. Not a lot of money for the Truck race. Xfinity's got some good money, obviously, with there being more cars showing up. And for the Cup race, you have to take account in the charter money. That's why the money is up for the Cup Series race, usually every single week. Now, that charter money is probably going to change with the purses increasing and all that going into the future. But I think the purse money is pretty solid for this weekend, all things considered. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about last place finishes. As it was reported by Trey Ryan that according to him, there have been 24 different drivers who have finished last so far in the first 24 races of the year. This is the first time that this has happened since from the end of 2007 going into 2008. It's honestly very impressive. We know Brock Beard always has the NASCAR championship, and usually you've got a driver who has a couple last place finishes. But this week, I believe the last place finisher was Todd Gilliland, and we saw a different last place finisher at Indy and Richmond, and I believe Mark Truex Jr. finished last at Richmond, so things continue to change on that front. And it's only going to continue to change, and we could see our 25th different. I don't know what the official record is for the most different last place finishers in a row, but it's pretty crazy stat to see that there have been so many drivers who have finished in last place throughout the year. Pretty crazy and insane stat overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Reddick. As it was also reported by Trey Ryan that Tyler Reddick has an average finish in the last 7 races of a 3.29. That is the best stretch we've seen from a driver since Kyle Larson did it back in 2021. Tyler Reddick has been absolutely impressive. In the last 11 or 12 Cup Series races, he's only had one finish outside of the top 10. In fact, he's only had one finish outside of the top 9 in the last 10 or 11 races, and that being a 22nd place finish, I believe, at Iowa when he struggled in the event. Tyler Reddick has been super impressive. He's had the pace and speed to contend on a week-by-week basis, and he's really, in my opinion, probably the new favorite to win the NASCAR Cup Series title and championship. And I think there's a really good chance by the end of this year that he might get his first title. I think he's been close to winning a few races. I think he'll win more races by the end of the year, but it's pretty impressive to see Tyler Reddick continue to be as impressive as he's been, considering he's had a really amazing and great year so far in 2024, all things considered. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Gase. As it was announced yesterday that Joey Gase will drive the 44 for NY Racing this weekend at Daytona. This will be NY Racing's first start with a different driver this year, as in the previous race they've had JJ Yeley behind the wheel. This also, I believe, is the first Cup start that Joey Gase has made since 2021 when he drove for Rick Ware Racing. I could be wrong on that, though. But Joey, of course, has been focused on owning a NASCAR Xfinity Series team, so he's been really focused on that. I expect Joey to struggle. The cars had decent speed in the past. They do have RCR and ECR engines, which will probably help him this weekend, but I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire. I think he could unfortunately struggle. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see him have a good run, but sadly, I don't think he's going to have a really strong and fantastic run, sadly, this weekend at Daytona. Hopefully he can, though, have a really good run and prove me wrong this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dexter Bean. As it was announced on late Monday and early Tuesday that Dexter Bean will drive a 0-2 for Young's Motorsports this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile. I believe this will be Dexter Bean's first Truck Series start of 2024. He's made multiple truck starts in the past, but I believe it will be the first time that we've seen Dexter Bean in a Young's Motorsports truck. Now, the 0-2 truck, we'll talk about the driver's been driving most of the year in just a little bit, but I think Dexter Bean is a solid driver. He's had some decent runs, unfortunately had some big wrecks at super speedways, but I think they needed someone who was going to bring a little sponsorship and funding, and I believe Dexter does have a little bit of funding to really help them out. I don't expect Dexter to be a major threat and contender, but I hope he can have a good run, help the team in the ownership and the owner standings and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully we can see Dexter Bean have a really solid and pretty good run this weekend at Milwaukee Mile, while other drivers will be racing at Daytona as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about right side windows. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass earlier this evening, that NASCAR is going to be mandating that teams are required a deflector on the right side window starting this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. Now, why is NASCAR doing this? Well, this has to do with the Corey LaJoie flip that took place on Monday at Michigan. If you're watching the NASCAR Cup Series race with 65 laps to go, Corey LaJoie went upside down, flipping multiple times and doing multiple barrel rolls down the back straightaway after having a little bit of contact with Noah Gragson. It seemed like he maybe was trying to retaliate just a little bit, but it really didn't fully look like that in certain instances as well. I think this is a solid decision. It is going to create some of those aero issues, unfortunately, but I think especially for going to Daytona after you just were at Michigan where you're going really fast, I feel like NASCAR is doing this for safety reasons, and I can't blame them for doing this, especially with safety being one of the most biggest priorities that NASCAR has always had. I think they are making a good decision right here to go ahead and do this. Honestly, they've had it on the left side. They do it to get the cars picked up, especially if they have a tire going down, and now it's going to be mandated on the right side. Again, I think this is a good move on NASCAR's end to try to have cars not flipping upside down back straightaways, especially because remember last year, Ryan Preece basically had one of the worst wrecks we've seen in the next-gen era so far. I really hope that this can help the sport, and I think it is a good decision to go ahead and have this on the car going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jeff Striegel. As it was announced earlier this evening that Jeff Striegel will not be returning to MRN after being there for 27 years at the end of this year. I don't know if he officially confirmed whether or not he's retiring, but it does look like there's a really good chance and possibility that Jeff Striegel will be retiring at the end of this year. He's been with MRM, like I said, for 27 years, since all the way back in the 1996 to 1997 NASCAR season. He's been one of the biggest voices of MRN for many, many years. And he's made a lot of incredible calls throughout the 2000s, the 2010s. It's really sad to see because we know Doug Rice is going to be retired from PRN and MRN at the end of this year as well. And I have got Jeff Striegel, who's been working as a worker in radio for a long time, retiring as well. As I don't know who's going to be taking his place, I could see Alan Gavana coming in and taking over as the lead announcer going forward, or maybe Alex Hayden's going to come in and be the lead announcer going forward as well. Again, it's really sad to see that Jeff Striegel is retiring, but sometimes you have to move on and make decisions. And honestly, I really hope, and congratulations nonetheless to Jeff Striegel on an incredible career, being with MRN for many, many years. It's unknown what his plans are past this year, but if this truly is the last time we're going to see Jeff Striegel in MRN, congratulations on an amazing and incredible career. You've earned a retirement, my friend. Congratulations on a very awesome and fantastic year. Your many years working at MRN for the many years you've been there. Congratulations on a great career, Jeff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mason Massey. Now, I already talked about the fact that Dexter Bean will be driving a 02 truck for Young's Motorsports this weekend. Now, the usual driver who's behind the wheel of the 02 truck is Mason Massey. However, he confirmed on Facebook on Monday evening that he will not be racing this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile. He said it's something that is out of his control at this point, but he is hoping to be back at the racetrack very, very soon. Now remember, Mason Massey was supposed to be full-time with Young's Motorsports the whole entire year. And honestly, Mason Massey has had a decent year. He's had a couple top 20 finishes with the organization. He almost got a top 10 in Martinsville earlier this year. And I feel like Mason Massey has done a pretty good job keeping his nose clean throughout the year, considering Young's Motorsports is a team in recent years that unfortunately has been struggling quite a bit. So I am disappointed to see that Mason Massey is no longer going to be with this team, at least for this weekend. Now, it isn't confirmed at this point if Mason is just gone for this weekend in Milwaukee and they need to bring someone with sponsor and funding more than what Mason has, or they're just looking for a different shakeup to see what they can do. Again, Dexter Bean, like I mentioned earlier, does have a little bit of sponsorship, but he doesn't have the biggest amount of sponsorship, all things considered. So I'm not exactly sure what Mason Massey is going to be doing. I don't know if he'll just come and run the Xfinity race potentially. That could happen. We don't know at this point. But as of right now, Mason Massey will not be racing this weekend. It is disappointing to hear, but at the same token, same time, sometimes things happen and sometimes things will happen out of your control. I do hope in the near future, though, we do get to see Mason Massey back on the wheel of a Craftsman truck before the end of 2024. I'm not sure what he'll be doing, though, past these points. And now we're going to ahead jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Weatherman. As Kyle Weatherman confirmed earlier today or yesterday that he's officially been cleared to race this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. If you watch the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, Kyle Weatherman was about 22 or 23 laps down after having, I believe, electrical issues on his car, but he did return from the garage to try to complete as many laps as possible to try to pick up some points in the owner's point standings. And with 9 laps to go in the Xfinity Series race, we saw Kyle Weatherman hit the outside wall and pretty much pancake the car. He said that was the hardest hit that he's probably ever had in his NASCAR Xfinity Series career, and it led to overtime at the end of the event. Look, I'm glad to see Kyle Weatherman has been cleared. I think Kyle is one of the best talents that isn't in a really good ride. I've said that Kyle deserves a top-tier opportunity. And I feel like this year has unfortunately been a little bit of a disappointment for Kyle Weatherman, but I feel like DGM in certain instances, they've been making some pretty big mistakes. Ever since they lost Josh Williams, I feel like this team hasn't fallen off just a little bit, considering the fact that Josh Williams has had a terrible year this year overall at Colin Racing. He was very good with DGM and was really good at helping build up their equipment. So I really hope that Kyle is good enough to race. Obviously, if he gets injured, it would be really sad to see. So I hope he doesn't. I just hope for Kyle's sake he's going to be okay. And glad to see he is cleared to race this weekend. It was a very serious wreck. Luckily, Kyle was okay, and glad to see that he will for sure be back behind the wheel this weekend, because I think Kyle is a good driver, one of the best, like I said, one of the best younger talents. He's about 30 years old at this point. I would really love to see Kyle, though, in the near future, have the chance and opportunity to drive for a top-tier organization, maybe in the not-so-distant future, with a great team and organization. And now we're going ahead jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. As it was confirmed a couple days ago that Shane Van Gisbergen will in fact drive the number 16 car for Colleague Racing this weekend at Daytona. This will be the first time the SVG is driving at Daytona in the NASCAR Cup Series, but remember, he has been to Daytona International Speedway in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, where he finished 11th, and he also competed in the Rolex 24 at Daytona as well in the GT class. I think SVG is going to have a really solid chance and opportunity. He was really fast at Talladega, led some laps, but unfortunately got trapped near the back of the pack, got stuck in that really long outside lane, and unfortunately ended up finishing 28th at Talladega earlier this year. But I do think that Shane is going to do a lot better. Every time he gets behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup Xfinity or an Xfinity Series car, he just continues to get better. And Colleague Racing, say what you want to say, their Super Speedway program in the Cup Series has been pretty solid. AJ Allmendinger had a very fast car at Daytona during Daytona 500 earlier this year. And I do believe that SVG, with the help from Trackhouse Racing, I do think he's also going to be there to help Ross Chastain get in the playoffs as well, because we know that Trackhouse Racing most likely is going to be building this car. So we do think he'll get some help from Trackhouse Racing during the event. We're going to talk about Shane here in just a little bit with silly season stuff, and also, of course, another race that he might be running that hasn't been officially confirmed. But I'm glad to see that Shane will be back behind the wheel this weekend at Daytona. He's got a lot more races coming up. It's going to be a busy weekend for him. It could be a doubleheader if the Xfinity Series race ends up getting postponed to Saturday, potentially, if the weather becomes an issue. But pretty exciting and good to see that Shane will, in fact, be driving the number 16 car for Colleague Racing this weekend at Daytona. And now we're going ahead jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. As Kevin Harvick spoke about Kyle Larson on Actions Detrimental. And there's been a lot of debate and discussion about, is Kyle Larson a better driver than Max Verstappen? Last week we talked about this on the channel as one of the big stories on Friday, where basically Kyle Larson claimed during the Knoxville Nationals that he feels like he's a better all-around driver than Max Verstappen. Now, obviously, this created a lot of debate and discussion. A lot of Formula One fans really chimed in saying that Max Verstappen's a better driver, but also some people said that Logan Sargent and Nicholas Latifi are better all-around drivers, which just shows they really don't know what is going on in motorsports. Now, Kyle Larson then later that week, unfortunately crashed in Michigan, so it's kind of a little bit of karma, and a lot of the F1 fans were very happy about that. Now, Kevin Harvick says, and agrees with me, that Kyle Larson, if you want to know, in my opinion, is a better all-around driver than Max Verstappen. That's not saying Max Verstappen is a bad driver. Max is one of the best drivers in the world, and he had an interview with Ash Vanderlei recently in the last couple months, where he's probably going to get asked this weekend at the Dutch Grand Prix from the F1 media about Kyle Larson. which I think Max Verstappen knows that there's some drivers that are better at other disciplines. Kyle Larson probably could jump in an F1 car, though, and jump in a Red Bull car, and probably will get up to speed pretty quickly. While a driver like Max Verstappen would probably do okay in a NASCAR Cup Series car, but probably wouldn't go out there and contend instantly, even if he was in a top-tier car. A lot of NASCAR drivers do have a lot of discipline in other series, but they don't have the technical stuff that Formula One has. That being said, if you want my personal opinion, I still think Kyle Larson is a better all-around driver. I know he probably shouldn't be talking smack about other drivers when he crashes the next week, but at the same time, like I said, I entirely agree. I do think that Kyle Larson all around is a better race car driver. Some will disagree, and that's fine and understandable, and I get it. But at the same time, like I mentioned, I do think Kyle Larson is all around a better race car driver than Max Verstappen when it comes to all around and not just one series. I think Larson is 100% a better driver than Max Verstappen, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episodes as we're talking about start times once again. This has been a big debate and conversation that's been going on over the course of the last week or so because the NASCAR Cup Series race once again got postponed to Monday due to weather. Now keep in mind the NASCAR Cup race in Michigan started at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. What a lot of people like myself and Jeff Gluck have been arguing is should we start the races a little bit earlier or go back to standardized start times, especially at tracks that don't have lights. Well, Dale Jr. was one of the big people that chimed in on this, and he feels like, and talked about the situation, and he actually kind of feels like that NASCAR should go back to having earlier start times. Not just at tracks that don't have lights, but tracks that do have lights. I have conceded in a big way that maybe at tracks that do have lights, if you want to start races a little bit later, I really don't have a major issue and a problem with that 100%. But at tracks that do not have lights, there is no reason we should be starting races at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you start races earlier than that at 1 p.m. or noon, yes, there is a chance with the weather that you could get a potential of a race being rained out or basically delayed a little bit. But guess what? If you start the races a little bit earlier, you have a better chance and opportunity to completing the race and getting to halfway. There is no reason at tracks like Michigan, tracks like Talladega, tracks like other ones, like of course like New Hampshire, for example, Dover, tracks like those that don't have lights. If they can't afford lights either, you can't be starting races at 2:30 Eastern, especially in the summertime when the weather, especially with thunderstorms, can become a major issue and a major problem. So I really hope NASCAR is paying attention to this and looking at this going forward, and they're thinking, yeah, we do need to start making a decision to start these races a little bit earlier. I feel like if they started these races earlier, they would have a better chance of getting it in. I really hope they're looking at this and listening to us, and I really hope they decide to do this. Are they going to do it? I don't know at this point, but I really hope in the near future they go ahead and make a decision to try to start race a little bit earlier. I know some will disagree, especially people from California, but I feel like that if you can't get up at a certain point, that's on you, and that's your problem. You need to be getting up earlier so you can watch the races. To be honest with you guys, I think they need to start doing that going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. As it was reported by Adam Stern and many big-name journalists in the industry, that Stewart-Haas Racing notified the NC Department of Commerce that up to 323 employees from Stewart-Haas Racing will be laid off at the end of this year. Remember, Stewart-Haas Racing will be closing at the end of 2024 as Tony Stewart will no longer be involved in NASCAR in any major shape or form. Now remember, Haas Factory Team is still going to be around in the 2025 season. Cole Custer is going to be driving the number 41 in the NASCAR Cup Series, moving back up the Cup, while Sam Mayer will drive the 41 car and Sheldon Creed will drive the 00 car. 9,200 of the 323 employees will be working at Haas Factory Team, but a lot of these other people are going to be looking for new jobs going into 2025. Now, some of these people that are basically leaving Stewart-Haas Racing as a team shuts down, some of them have already found jobs. There's even rumors that people like Greg Zipadelli could be headed over to Richard Childress Racing for 2025. I feel bad for a lot of these people. I know that SHR and Tony have said that they're going to do their best to try to find a way that all the people working at Stewart-Haas Racing can have a job for 2025. But unfortunately, some of these people that work at SHR are not going to have jobs, sadly, in 2025. And again, it's very unfortunate. Some will probably work, like I said, with the Haas factory team for next year, while others are going to have to find somewhere else to go and maybe work in a different department in NASCAR and maybe not, or maybe go in a different sport going forward. I really hope that all these people, though, working at SHR that are losing their jobs, I really hope they can find a new job for next year, because all these people, there's a lot of good, hardworking people on the team, and they all deserve the chance and opportunity to find a job for next year. So I really hope for sure going into next year, every single one of these people that have worked at the team, the drivers, you name it, like Ryan Preece, we're going to talk about in a little bit, some of these techs, some of these fabricators, you name it, I really hope they all can find a job for the 2025 season. But sadly, like I mentioned and said, there's going to be some of these people that are not going to be able to find a job, and they're probably going to be looking for something else to do going forward, and some may just end up retiring, sadly. So I really hope they all can end up finding a job for next year, and they can find somewhere to go, because a lot of these people deserve to be working in an organization or a team going into next year, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Parker Kligerman. As it was announced earlier today that Parker Kligerman has been issued an L1 penalty, has been issued 20 driver points and owner's points have been removed from Parker Kligerman. Now, why was Parker Kligerman penalized, and why was the 48 Big Machine Racing organization penalized? Well, their car was one of the Xfinity Series cars that was taken to the R&D Center. And according to NASCAR, they found something on the rear spoiler of the car, which is why they received an L1 penalty. This moves Parker Kligerman from being only 36 points above Ryan Sieg to now only being 16 points above the cutoff line. And I also didn't mention this either, they also lose 5 playoff points. So they still end up being inside of the top 10. They will basically be down in the negative. This is not very good for Parker Kligerman. This team, in my opinion, has shown a lot of pace and speed this year. They've had a very solid year, all things considered, but getting this L1 penalty could be really big, considering the fact we've got 2 super speedways coming up very soon. You, of course, got Daytona this weekend on Friday, tomorrow. You've got that coming up. You've got Darlington. Darlington's always been very chaotic, and Parker Kligerman has been pretty inconsistent at Darlington the last couple of years. Also got Atlanta, another super speedway track. This is the type of stuff that can hurt an organization and team. And this is a team that I predicted going into this year that was easily going to make the playoffs. And they were on the way to making it. I thought they were 7th in the standings, but they dropped from about 9th or 10th all the way back now down to 11th. Now, they do have a 16-point cushion, and they can make that up, but they're going to be in a little bit of trouble going forward. This is disappointing news to hear, all things considered. I do not believe that they are going to appeal it. They basically have 24 hours to go ahead and appeal it. And at this time right now when I'm filming, which is about 10 p.m. at night, I don't believe they plan to appeal. If they do appeal, there is a chance I could talk about it here on the channel potentially Monday or Tuesday. But as of right now, Parker Kligerman and Big Machine Racing are not planning to appeal, which I think is probably the best thing they can do so they can focus on trying to win Daytona. If you mess with that kind of stuff, you are going to get penalized, and I do think that they made the right decision to penalize them, because you can't be messing with the rear spoilers, especially at tracks like super speedways, because you can get a huge advantage if you do that. So I think they made the right call to go ahead and penalize Parker Kligerman. Yes, it's very unfortunate, but at the same token, same time, you can't be messing with that stuff. Otherwise, you unfortunately are going to end up receiving a penalty for messing with that type of stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, on Monday night, after the Cup Series race concluded, NASCAR put up a video of the end of the race for the final restart. You had a lot of drivers up front. Obviously, Tyler Reddick and William Byron were on the front row for the final restart. Behind those 2 drivers, you, of course, had Brad Keselowski, Ty Gibbs, and Kyle Busch. Now, basically, the video plays, and you can actually see that Kyle Busch is trying to make a move 3 wide to the bottom. All of a sudden, Brad Keselowski tries to send it 3 wide, trying to get as many positions as possible. Then Kyle Busch puts a comment on Twitter by saying, "What is Brad, the 6th car, doing? What the F is Brad Keselowski doing on the final restart there?" Well, we all know that Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch have had a lot of history in the past, going back to the early 2010s. You remember back in 2009 and 2010 when Kyle Busch was really mad at Brad Keselowski and Brian Vickers after Busch lost at Michigan. Then in 2010, Kyle and Brad got into an altercation, or basically got into a race altercation throughout the event. We saw this situation there. And over the years, these two have really not liked each other. Now, they've worked together in the past, but Kyle and Brad do not really respect each other, it seems like, despite the fact they're two of the greatest drivers in the sport. But it's crazy to see that after as long as they've had a rivalry, which has been almost 15 years at this point, going back to when Kyle drove for JGR and Brad drove for Team Penske, it's very interesting to see that both drivers are still mad at each other about situations. Again, Brad's trying to do whatever he can, and Brad apparently have been having engine issues. I saw some comments basically in the comment section that Brad apparently was having some sort of engine issues going on in his car, which might have affected the speed, which again, that can come into play. It's crazy to see, though, that after all the years they've had issues with each other, it seems like they continue to have these problems going forward. I hope it doesn't strain on their relationship. Again, though, they've had a rivalry for many, many years, so it seems like it's nothing new at this point. It's kind of sad to see, though, that this all continues. I really hope it doesn't cause some issues going forward, because they're both going to be fast at Daytona this week. We know they're probably going to be fast at Darlington. Brad won the last time we were there in the spring, so we'll see what ends up happening. But we'll see if they have issues going forward. But it's kind of crazy to see that Brad and Kyle are still kind of having issues. And Kyle seems to be a little bit mad at Brad Keselowski about that final restart, which could lead to him getting asked questions about that this weekend in the media center. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, we've all talked about the Corey LaJoie flip. We already talked about the fact they're requiring teams have a right side reflector. Well, Breakard and I believe Basso put out a radio communication suggesting something about Corey LaJoie. Denny Hamlin was sitting about 19th or 20th position. Now, early in the race, Denny Hamlin actually spun out down the front straightaway, getting in the wake of Bubba Wallace's air. And Denny Hamlin was right behind Corey LaJoie when he flipped upside down. Now, Denny Hamlin went on the radio and basically called out Corey LaJoie. He basically said, Corey LaJoie is out of control. F me, he is his own worst enemy. And then Chris Gabehart came on the radio and said, kind of like, copy. Now, Denny Hamlin is 100% correct about Corey LaJoie. This is the first time a driver has flipped upside down twice in a same season since 1993, when Rusty Wallace flipped twice at Daytona during the Daytona 500, I believe, and at the Talladega 500 in the summer of 1993 as well. Now, Corey LaJoie, like I mentioned, has been out of control throughout the whole entire season. He has been causing a lot more incidents. He's been causing a lot of wrecks. And this is one of the big reasons why Corey LaJoie does not have a ride currently at the moment going into 2025. Now, there have been rumors going around about Corey LaJoie potentially going to McAnally-Hilgeman, driving one of their trucks next year, or could end up driving for a team like Rick Ware Racing next year. There's been rumors about that potentially happening. Now, I do think that Corey LaJoie is a talented race car driver, but he's got to clean up his act, and he's got to stop wrecking cars. Because if he can't keep a car like Spires down and keep wrecking it, he's going to not have a chance at a really, really good ride next year. And what's really bad about the situation for Corey LaJoie is the fact that both his rookie teammates, Zane Smith and Carson Osbar, both of them ended up finishing inside of the top 10, which is really a bad look on Corey LaJoie's part. Corey LaJoie is still looking for his first top 10 finish on a non-super speedway. Meanwhile, Zane Smith's had 2 or 3 top 10s on non-super speedways, and Carson Osbar has had 3 straight top 10 finishes and 4 or 5 top 10s so far this year. Carson's had a really solid and great year, and Zane is starting to really get better at this point. I really hope Corey LaJoie can end the year off on a really high note, because like I've already mentioned and said, Corey is still looking for a ride going into 2025, and we don't know at this particular moment where he is going to be headed for 2025 at this point. But like I've kind of also mentioned, we've been hearing some rumors and rumblings that he could end up at McAnally-Hilgeman. So we'll see what Corey LaJoie and where he ends up going for 2025. But he's, like Denny is right about this, he seems to be his own worst enemy. He needs to clean it up going forward so he doesn't end up having major wrecks going forward into the future and can kind of find a ride for the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the team announcement. So basically, Joseph Straley, who works at TobyChristie.com and Racing America as well, does editing stuff for both those websites, he put out a tweet indicating that there is going to be a team announcement this Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right before the NASCAR Cup Series race takes place. Now, this needs to be noted. This team announcement that was supposed to happen was supposed to originally happen before the race at Richmond, about a couple hours prior to the race. It was supposed to happen before Travis Pastrana and Nitrocross got onto the stand. That ended up getting canceled, and then it was moved to this past weekend in Michigan. It was supposed to happen on Saturday morning at 9:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then they canceled the event the night prior. And now they've pushed the event for the third week in a row. Hopefully, third time is the charm, so we can get this announcement out of the way. Now, what is this potential announcement going to be? Honestly, I don't know, to be honest. It could be Rich Schultz Racing announcing Greg Zipadelli potentially going over there. There's been, like I said, a lot of rumors and rumblings that Greg Zipadelli could be going over there to be the competition director for 2025. It also could be a team announcing their 2025 plans. College Racing, they're expected to have a pretty much different lineup for their Xfinity program next year. Josh Williams might be coming back. We do know Christian Eck is heavily rumored to go to the 16 car next year. We also do know that the other drivers like Daniel Dye could be headed up to Xfinity. We also know some other drivers like Nick Sanchez could be on the move, making their way up. Another team could be Joe Gibbs Racing. Joe Gibbs Racing is also expected to have an all-new lineup for 2025 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Williams Walsh, Taylor Gray, and Brandon Jones are all expected to be there next year. We do know that there's been rumors, of course, of other drivers making moves, and this could just be something else like a sponsorship announcement. We don't entirely know for sure at this particular moment. But whatever this announcement is, they need to figure it out and stop canceling it and wasting everybody's time. I really hope it's a pretty big announcement. Again, it could be RCR announcing some stuff. We're not entirely sure. We're going to have to wait. Maybe it's Haley Deegan announcing something. Probably not at this point because she's probably going to be focused on other stuff. But it could be something else. We don't know. Maybe Carl Lewis, Kurt Busch coming out of time or something like that. Who knows at this point. But we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens, what this big announcement is. It could be 2311 announcing Riley Hurts. That could be a potential possibility. It could be that Kyle Busch thing about him going to Adelaide, even though that seems to be canceled at this point. We don't know entirely for sure, but there is a team announcement scheduled. We'll have to kind of wait and see what it is at this point. But we do know there's an official team announcement that is coming very soon. It'll be very interesting to see what that team announcement officially is for the future. We'll see what it ends up being here very, very soon. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NBC Sports. As it was announced earlier this morning, that NBC Sports will have no full-screen commercials during green flag action at Daytona, Atlanta, and Talladega this year for the next 3 Super Speedway NASCAR Cup Series races on NBC. This is an absolute huge dub for NASCAR and NBC. This has been something that I've been asking for a very long time, probably since the mid-2010s. We are in an ever-changing landscape when it comes to media and other things as well. When it comes to younger generations of fans, you cannot get the fans to move away, because if you basically put on full-screen ads, there is a chance that those fans that you're trying to keep around to watch your presentation, watch your broadcast, among other things, there's a very good chance and possibility that those fans are going to click off your screen and they're going to stop watching. And you cannot have that if you're going to be very successful as a broadcaster. That's why I think NBC made a major dub. This is one of the best things that I genuinely have seen a broadcaster do so far this year. And I'm really happy about this. It's going to kind of be like TNT's wide open coverage they had from the late 2000s all the way to the mid-2010s when they ran at Daytona. You didn't end up missing any action in the event. It was one of the greatest decisions that I think a broadcast partner had done back then too. And what they're probably going to do, they probably will have side-by-side ads more than likely throughout the events. But overall, I think that this is one of the best things that we've seen a broadcast partner do at this point. And I absolutely am a major and massive fan of this. And I think this is going to be really huge, and this could open up a lot of doors going forward, and maybe for some other broadcasts that you may see on Amazon, which we could see Alan Best would go to Amazon, by the way. There's a rumor about that potentially happening, but I really hope they can incorporate this in some sort of way into other broadcasts going forward. So I really love this amazing addition that they're going to be bringing in. It's pretty exciting and great to see that every single lap during green flag, not cautions, but every lap during green flag, you'll get to see, I think is one of the best things they've done in recent years, in my honest opinion. One of the best decisions I think a broadcast partner has ever done, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, Trackhouse Racing has not officially announced this, but it looks like, according to Joseph Strictly and Acceptance Insurance, according to this, Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be driving the 16 car for Kaulig Racing during the Southern 500, meaning that Shane Van Gisbergen looks like will be doing back-to-back races in 2024. Southern 500 is one of the most grueling events every single year. The Cookout Southern 500 is also the longest event of the year, which will give Shane Van Gisbergen a major test. What this also tells me is that Trackhouse Racing is getting very close to announcing SVG's 2025 plans. We do know Shane Van Gisbergen is most likely expected to be full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series with Trackhouse Racing in 2025. And I think Shane is absolutely ready to make the move up. Shane has been getting better on ovals. Yes, he didn't have the greatest finish at Michigan. He did come back to finish inside the top 20 in 17th place. But previously, during the Indianapolis race, he ended up finishing in 4th. And had he not had that issue on the restart, he most likely gets a top 10 at Michigan. And we know he's gotten better on super speedways as well. And we know he's a really good road course racer. And you just have to win one race to make the playoffs. Which is why I think Shane will be running more races by the end of the year. And I wouldn't be surprised or shocked that once they officially confirm that Shane is going to be full-time, I wouldn't be surprised if they may get a third Kaulig car just to get him prepared for next year and get the experience. So I am really excited about this for Shane. I'm really happy that he is going to be racing at Southern 500, running back-to-back weeks. It's more content for me to talk about especially, but I think it's pretty cool that he is going to get to run more races this year. There's another race that wasn't scheduled. Remember, Daytona was not originally on a schedule for 2024, but they're continuing to add races for him, and honestly, I think it's a really good decision for Trackhouse to try to get him as much experience as possible so he can be prepared for the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season, because remember, we are expecting that SVG is going to be full-time in the Cup Series next year, and the more experience you can give a driver like Shane, the better it's going to be for him. So this is a great move, in my opinion, from Trackhouse Racing overall, and pretty exciting and great to see that SVG will most likely be running the Southern 500, getting a little bit more experience. Once that officially becomes announced, we'll likely have a special broadcast talking about this, but SVG looks like we'll be making a start in the Southern 500 later this year for the Cookout Southern 500. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about RFK Racing. Now, earlier today, Chris Knight from CashFence.net put out a very interesting article in regards to RFK Racing and rumors about potentially Ryan Preece going to RFK Racing in 2025. This past week, or about a week or so ago, Adam Stern had reported that Kroger is changing where they're potentially going to be headed in 2025. We all initially thought that they were going to be headed to Joe Gibbs Racing, as they have worked together with Joe Gibbs Racing in the past. However, over the last week or so, reports have changed that Kroger, instead of going over to Joe Gibbs Racing, could be headed over to RFK Racing for 2025, which could lead the organization to picking up a third charter for 2025. And according to Adam Stern, Ryan Preece has potentially emerged as the lead candidate for that third seat if they are to expand for 2025. A lot of you are going to be asking, what about Justin Haley? Justin Haley's been rumored at points to go to third RFK Racing seat, but we do know at this particular point that Justin Haley is the current lead candidate to drive the number 7 car for the team for 2025. Some have said, what about maybe like Kyle Busch going to RFK? Well, Kyle Busch is probably staying with RCR, and there's not really a lot of other drivers that you could look at, as we know that Justin is going to Spire. With Sam Mayer been rumored at one point, but he's going to Haas Factory. There's been other drivers that I've heard, but I don't know where he's going to be, but at this point, Justin Haley is a favorite to drive the 7 car. If Ryan Preece was to become the lead option to drive for RFK Racing next year in a third car, if they are to get a third charter, that would be a very interesting move. Yes, Ryan Preece has kind of struggled in the NASCAR Cup Series with Stewart-Haas Racing. There is no denying that. But I think if you gave Ryan Preece a top-tier opportunity, which RFK, they may not be the fastest organization in Cup, but they're a team that has continued to improve, and they're a top 10 team a lot of weeks. I think you put him in a third car like the Sage 60 car, that would be a very good move for him. I think Ryan Preece could have a career resurgence. Ryan Preece is not a bad race car driver, and he joined a sinking ship at Stewart-Haas Racing. When he got in there, that was the first season that Stewart-Haas Racing failed to score a win in the Cup Series. Chase Briscoe failed to win, and he had one of the worst seasons he's ever had in his Cup career up to this point. This is a team that is really starting to struggle. RFK Racing, meanwhile, has continued to improve. Now, let's say Ryan Preece doesn't become the lead option to go to a third seat. Who could they get? Honestly, I don't really know at this point. Hailie Deegan is not ready to move up. Matt DiBenedetto, I think, is probably staying in Xfinity next year. And you're not moving anybody else up from the 4 camp unless you want to find a way to move Ty Majeski up. But Ty Majeski, I don't think, is ready to move up the Cup at this particular point. So, or maybe Harrison Burton could be the other option, but Harrison might be going to Xfinity, or there's rumors of him maybe going to Tricon Garage next year if Taylor Gray moving up. So now the other big question is, where could they get the third charter? Some have suggested they get the charter from SHR, but I have another theory. I could see them getting a charter from Rick Ware. Rick Ware and RFK did have a partnership, and they still have a partnership. That's why the rumors are justly going over to RFK at points. I definitely think that they would get the charter from Rick Ware Racing. I think Rick Ware focusing on one car for next year would really help their program, despite the fact that the 51 car has shown a lot of improvement, and the 15 car has been fast at times as well. I think focusing on one entry would not be a bad move for the team and organization. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to the future of RFK if they do expand to third car. I don't know if it's going to happen at this point, but the rumors are continuing to circulate that this could end up happening, and we could see Ryan Preece find his way somehow over to RFK Racing, which would be an upgrade for him instead of a downgrade. So he could find a way in a better ride, and all the SHR drivers would find seats, because we know Grayson's going over to front row, we know Briscoe's going to Joe Gibbs Racing, and Josh Berry is going to the Wood Brothers for 2025 going into next year and next season. There's some other drivers that could be on the move in the future as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the second major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Leigh Diffey. As it was officially finally announced after months of speculation that Leigh Diffey has been officially named play-by-play announcer for NASCAR on NBC for the remainder of this season, starting at Daytona International Speedway. This has been rumored over the course of the last few months. It got rumored by Adam Stern back in April and May that we were going to be seeing a transition for NBC for the remainder of the year. First, what does this mean for Rick Allen? Well, Rick Allen, according to reports, will be still with NASCAR and NBC, but will not be calling the NASCAR Cup Series. Instead, we'll be doing the Xfinity Series broadcast for the remainder of this season on NBC. Then he'll be going over to the CW for the remainder of the year, which, of course, CW begins their broadcast starting at Bristol on September 20th, which will go for the remainder of the year, while NASCAR and NBC will produce all those broadcasts on the CW. So nothing's changing there except the broadcasting home there. What does this mean for Leigh Diffey going to the lead commentator role? I have been wanting this for a very long time. Do not get me wrong. Rick Allen has improved so much as a lead commentator over the course of the last couple of years. That being said, Leigh Diffey is one of the top lead commentators, not just in motorsports, but in the world. He did a pretty incredible job covering track and field at the Olympics earlier this year. He had that one big mess up, and every other race he called on track and field, he did a very excellent job. He's been calling IndyCar races for many, many years. He's had some fabulous, fantastic calls at the Indianapolis 500 over the course of the last couple of years. Call Helio Castroneves' 2021 Indy 500 win. Call Simon Pagenaud's first Indy 500 win. Of course, called the incredible finish in 2022 and 2023 and 2024 as well between Pat O'Ward and Joseph Newgarden. And on top of that as well, he has called many Rolex 24s, not just on the Speed Channel, but also, of course, there. He's called Supercross events. He's called a lot of major events, and also has past NASCAR experience. He called some races in 2017 when Rick Allen, I believe, was calling some track and field events. He called Watkins Glen. He's also called some Xfinity races back in 2015, and also called Michigan, and called that incredible four-wide move that Kyle Larson made on Matt Kenseth and Mark Truex Jr., those guys, and was able to get the win there. Leigh Diffey is going to bring the action and bring the excitement. Now, I am disappointed that Leigh Diffey will not be calling IndyCar races. For those who are wanting to know who will be the lead commentator for IndyCar races for the remainder of the year, that is going to be Kevin Lee before IndyCar, of course, heads off to Fox for next year. There are rumors that James Hinchcliffe and Kevin Lee are both probably going to be headed over to Fox next year, but that's not officially confirmed at this point. But I am so excited to see that Leigh Diffey is going to be bringing in, along with the fact that every single lap will be televised, that's under green flag condition. You're not going to miss a beat at all. Leigh is going to bring the action for the rest of the year, not just at Daytona, but also for the rest of the year. I know some people are probably going to get tired of Leigh, but I'm not going to get tired of Leigh Diffey. I always enjoy his lead commentary in IndyCar, and he's just gotten so much better over the years, and I think that Leigh Diffey is really going to bring a lot of excitement and a lot to the table for NASCAR and NBC. He's going to bring that energy the booth needs. With Dale Jr. no longer there anymore, with him, of course, going to Amazon, I think Leigh Diffey is really going to set the world on fire. And you think about the fact that there's a lot of big moves going to be happening in the broadcast world. There's a lot of big changes that are coming there. We know Dale Jr. is going to Amazon. We know the Steve Letard's rumored to be going to TNT and Amazon. Marty Smith's been mentioned. We know Alan Bestwick's been rumored. Carl Evers has been interested in coming back in the TV area, among other things. We do know that Adam Alexander might be going. He's had talks with Amazon, but there's rumors he's going to CW. Rick Allen could find his way over to Amazon. We're not entirely sure at this moment what's going to happen there. But I am so excited for Leigh Diffey to come in. Jimmy Johnson, remember, he's going to be calling some races while at the end of the year. And I just feel like that there's a lot of good things going on for NBC currently at the moment. And like I said, having Leigh Diffey come in and call some NASCAR Cup races, I think is going to be really exciting and very fun to watch. So I'm so excited about this. I'm really looking forward to this. And I think, like I said, Leigh Diffey is going to bring a lot to the table and lots to the plate when it comes to the energy. So again, I'm really excited about this. This is a really great move from NBC's part and I think Leigh Diffey is going to do a very excellent and great job calling races for the remainder of this year. Going to be really excellent stuff. I am going to miss Rick Allen, don't get me wrong, but at the same token, at the same time, I think this is a better move all around for NASCAR and NBC, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Dillon and Richard Childress Racing. Today was the big day on wondering whether or not NASCAR in the appeal process was going to change the ruling on it or they were going to uphold the penalty. Well, it was confirmed about 6 or 7 hours ago, or about 10 hours ago at this point, that Austin Dillon and his team have lost their appeal. NASCAR in the appeals panel, the appeals panel has officially upheld the penalty for the most part that Austin Dillon and RCR have received. There is a little bit of a change to the ruling, however, as Brendan Benesch, his suspension has been dropped down from 3 races to 1 race. That means that Brendan Benesch will be back spotting this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. However, the 25 owner point and driver point penalty stands for going forward, and they still are no longer back in the playoffs. Now, Richard Childress Racing did release a statement earlier today, and they said they are disappointed by a decision that the appeal panel made. They do respect the appeal process and NASCAR's appeal panel, but they also said that they are planning to appeal and go to final appeals officer, which, by the way, Bill Moles is the one who makes the decisions on the final appeal. The people that are part of the appeal process for today were Tom DeLoe, who was a former owner of Red Horse Racing. I can't remember the other 2 that were part of that, but from their statement, they said that NASCAR made the right decision and they upheld the penalty. So let's go through the backstory of this before I give my thoughts on the decision. Back at Richmond Raceway, Austin Dillon was trying to find his way into the playoffs. He got a terrible restart. There was a caution came out 2 laps ago. Got a terrible restart. Ran in the back of Joey Logano on the white flag. Forced Logano up the racetrack. I believe just went in the corner 4 or 5 tenths back. Completely dumps Joey Logano up in the corner. Then comes down the front straightaway and right rears Denny Hamlin down the straightaway. That is why NASCAR took the win away. Well, they let him keep the win, but they took the playoff eligibility away. Now, when it comes to the final appeal situation, do I think that Austin Dillon and Richard Childress Racing have a leg to stand on and any ground to stand on? No, absolutely not. Now, they may have a little bit of a better chance because we've seen them overturn on the final appeal, but the reason is because Kaulig Racing with the louver stuff, but that was because Hendrick Motorsports and all 4 drivers had gotten penalized. Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, William Byron, and of course Alex Bowman all got louvergate, but they got their penalties rescinded, so NASCAR went to the appeal and basically told them to overturn this, and they basically rescinded the penalty pretty much for Kaulig Racing to make it very, very fair. I don't think Austin Dillon and RCR, because they're going to be able to present their case on a situation, because while this is unprecedented for RCR to basically have a penalty like this, they still did make the wrong call here. And look, I go back to last year too. Last year after Gateway, it was a week after we saw basically Chase Elliott get suspended for right rear and Denny Hamlin down the straightaway. Austin Dillon and RCR were calling for Austin Cinders to be suspended, despite the fact that Austin Cinders really held this line. That's why I think it's very hypocritical on RCR's end. And look, a lot of people are going to say that Denny Hamlin wrecked himself. He did not. Look at the S&T data again. Denny Hamlin held his line. In fact, he went below the normal line. Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace ran the same line pretty much that Denny Hamlin ran. Austin Dillon went 70 degrees to the left and right-rear Denny Hamlin. If Austin Dillon had not right-rear Denny Hamlin down the straightaway, there is no way Austin Dillon gets a penalty, in my opinion. I think NASCAR absolutely made the right call, and the appeals panel did it. Now, we know that there is a chance he can win this. I don't think there really is any ground that Austin Dillon can stand out. I think that Bill Moles is going to side with NASCAR on this one, despite the fact that RCR is going to present their case. I just do not see in any shape or form Austin Dillon and RCR winning the final appeal. The fact that we have the radio communication from Brendan Benesh, we have the S&T data, and we have all the other data that has come out, the evidence clearly shows there is no way in any shape or form or in hell that Austin Dillon is going to win the final appeal. If somehow they rescind the penalty and he gets back into the playoffs in some way, there is going to be a lot of floodgates open, and not in a very good way. There is a chance that we could find a way for the championship to be cited like this. And I don't think you guys want the championship to be cited like this, where drivers are intentionally wrecking other drivers for the win. Now, they're probably going to cite what happened between Joey Logano and William Byron 2 years ago at Darlington. But they try to cite something, like what Logano did, of course, to Matt Kenseth, despite the fact that Matt Kenseth was blocking multiple different times. What happened in other situations. And again, they probably should have been suspended for one race for right rear. NASCAR could have done that if they wanted to. But I think today they made the right call. Now, going forward for NASCAR, and Denny Hamlin talked about this as well, NASCAR needs to find a way to start penalizing drivers in the moment. We can't be waiting 2 weeks for all this stuff to go through. We should not be still talking about this situation. We need to be moving on from this going forward. To me, going forward, when it comes to situations like this, it needs to happen at the racetrack. Series like the Cars Tour, which are lesser series, despite the fact they got great racing, they always, in the race, penalize 10 minutes after the race at the most, or at the night of the track when people are still in the stands. They do it pretty quickly. Going forward, NASCAR needs to stand with their ruling, and they need to go ahead and start penalizing drivers within the night. There is no excuse for them taking this long to have everything done. We shouldn't have waited till Wednesday. It should have been done the night of. Therefore, we're still not having these conversations going forward. I still, again, do not believe Austin Dillon is going to win. I just don't really see there being any way or form that they can win. Yes, they may have a little better chance of the finals appeal, but most likely they're not going to win the appeal. I sadly think they're going to lose. I know some are going to say it's not sad, but I don't see there being any way, shape, or form. Because if they win this appeal somehow, it's going to open up the floodgates, and I think a lot of fans are going to be really mad if your driver gets wrecked. Regardless of the driver, it's unacceptable. It happened in Richmond, and I hope we can get this finals appeal panel done, and we can be done with the discussion going forward. Because I'm tired of talking about this. I hope this really is the last time, or when we get the final appeal done, I really hope it's the last time that we're talking about the situation going forward. So, that is good for today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's description below that and comment your thoughts on today's episode. Do you think the appeal panel made the right decision? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Leigh Diffey joining NASCAR and NBC? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I don't think any more content dropping today on the channel. Tomorrow, more than likely, you're going to see a silly season update. You're also going to see the paint scheme video. You're also going to see the Xfinity Series race review and Shane Van Gisbergen video, more than likely. Saturday, we'll have the NASCAR Cup race review, an SVG video, and if any major news breaks on Saturday and throughout the weekend, we'll discuss it here live on the channel. Got a lot of great content that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.